Could we please have a roll call?
Ms. Bernstein, Ms. Christian, Mr. Globinger,
I'm here.
Ms. Oliver, Ms. Unical,
Here.
Ms. Shu,
Here.
Ms. Young.
Here.
Thank you. So 4 out of 7, we do have a quorum. First item on the agenda today is the consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to have taken off the consent agenda? Seeing nothing and hearing nothing, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
All right, Jamie, thank you for making the motion. Abby, thanks for seconding. Roll call, please.
Mr. Globinger,
Yes.
Ms. Unical,
Yes.
Ms. Shu,
Yes.
Ms. Young.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Do we have any public present? Is anybody online? Any
Live
public?
stream, so we won't ever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know if we had any questions.
Oh, they won't. They can't put questions in. They can only watch.
Oh, I thought they were able to we stopped doing that?
Yeah, that was just with Zoom when we were all on Zoom
Ah,
because they can come in person. So welcome.
Got it.
Join us.
all right, no public. Okay, next item on the agenda is a staff report. Kate?
Sure. So I wanted, I have a couple items, some of which were in my report, but just to kind of add a little bit too. So the library, as you saw from our most recent newsletter, did celebrate its 70th birthday / anniversary, depending on how you want to call it. And the village board was kind enough to recognize that. And so Jay and I were at the village board meeting at the end of June, where we received a lovely resolution claiming that that day when the library was formed, as for this year, is Northbrook Public Library Day. And so just recognizing how much the library has done over the years and thanking us.
Did you have
think that there was anything.
did you bring the
No,
publication?
because I made a note to print them and then I didn't.
Okay.
So I will email it to everyone tomorrow. I'm sorry. And I also want to mention, I put this in my report, but I am pulling off of 2 library land committees, really trying to take to heart the doing less. So I'm not going to be participating in Directors University or the ILA Advocacy Forum. As of yet, it has not freed up a lot of time, but I'm hopeful that as, you know, it's only been like a week. So I'm sure as time goes on, that will be really helpful. And I am going to be on vacation. I originally put the week of August 29th, but my in-laws, we needed to change. So it's actually going to be the week of August 22nd, still at the end of the month. And Kelly will be wonderfully in charge handling all of the fun stuff while I'm gone. I wanted to just touch on the 4th of July. It's, I know, been a few weeks now, and I know we mostly were just sharing with, that day sharing with all of you by text. We do have staff that live in Highland Park, and as I'm sure all of you have experienced, there's also just a ton of connections that exist. And so we, one of the things the Highland Park Library asked for was additional resources from other libraries on, healing and grief and talking to children about traumatic events. And so while we do have stuff here for our community, we also sent things there so that they could receive those. And Susan, our reference manager, I think coined it perfectly. It feels weird because it feels normal, but it isn't. And so not that we are in, as the police chief said, like the bubble where it's within close enough that this is something that did have a really huge impact on us and is something that staff are still grappling with. I know I am, I'm sure all of you are. And so just, we're trying really hard to just give people space. We did have one staff member who is retiring as a result of this, and some others that took some additional time off, which is to be expected. But I think it's just one of those things where it's been a lot over the last 2.5 years, and this was just one more piece of trauma that was layered on. And so it's been really hard. And I just wanted to let you guys know that while things are, of course, operational and good, inside it's still very challenging. And unfortunately, like, we can't really fix it, right? There isn't anything to fix. It's just a matter of giving ourselves time to feel what we're feeling and giving staff and the community space. So yeah, I don't know what else I want to. I had written out stuff and then I'm like, no, I'll just wing it.
Let me ask a quick question
Never a
while I
good
want to
idea.
July 4th.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the consequences of what happened was that everything going on in the communities surrounding Highland Park in terms of celebrations on that day were canceled. Has there been any discussion or reaching out by the village to talk about having some of those events rescheduled?
Oh, no, not rescheduled. I mean, we've been talking about what future large events will look like, what will need to happen. The Park District had Tuesday concert in the park. There was a very, very strong police presence there. One of the things that is a part of being in the bubble means that there's a higher possibility of copycat. So the police are, of course, taking that very, very seriously. The library itself is very, very low risk. And so no, but the Intelligentsia bike race is coming up, and that, of course, is going to bring a ton of people into town. So they have been working on taking additional security measures in addition to the ones that, the strong measures they already had in place. And then Kara and the police chief are gonna meet with the schools, and then we're gonna have a larger government agency meeting where we can talk about, like, next year, what does this look like? How does this look like moving forward, and what can we do now? And, like, I don't know, will there be a parade next year? I have no idea, but we do know that we have large events, the Park District has large events, the schools have large events. And so this is going to be something that requires, of course, a lot of discussion. We are lucky in that our police chief, being at CPD, he was the one who was in charge of security for Lollapalooza. So that's good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Experience.
So he's coming in with a lot of experience in looking at this and coming up with solutions. So
Different answer than what I was hoping for, but
yeah.
So you're talking about what kind of measures we'll be taking on an ongoing basis for security just to prevent anything like it from happening again, which, I mean, hopefully this is the kind of quote shoe bomber incident where you have a one-off and not a repetitive series of events. And hopefully, over time, the experience will allow us to continue on in some of the things that we have enjoyed as a community. Where I was going is, I mean, there are a lot of things that typically people were looking forward to on July 4th as a celebration that were, lost.
Yep.
And I didn't know if the village had been talking about ways to try and help through healing, help the village kind of have some of those events, things like fireworks, putting aside the parade, because I don't know that anyone wants to go to a parade right now.
Right.
But some of the other types of events that typically would take place, if there's been any discussion, because usually if there was a rain out, you would have a alternate date. So.
And that's a great question. There hasn't been any that I am aware of. There might be some going on between the village and the Park District. So I'll reach out and ask and see if there is anything.
I'm just curious because, I mean, I'm sure the community would like to have a reason to come together in a positive sense and not just in a, negative or experiencing trauma sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's why they're kind of focusing their efforts on the Intelligentsia bike racing, to hope that that is a really positive community event. So maybe that, but I'll let me ask and I'll find out if there is anything that maybe I'm just not aware of.
Yeah, and then, I mean, I think the other issue you brought up, which is to the extent we're having significant events, are there any changes we need to be making, or are there any procedures we want to go through with the police department to make sure they're aware that we are having large events, so if there's any need for additional security, we can take it.
Yeah, and so we have a police liaison. I'm actually going to make Kelly talk, because Kelly is in charge of all of our Kelly does all of our safety and security procedures and training and everything. And this is something that we talk about with them on kind of an ongoing basis.
Yeah, so we, anytime we have a large event outside of the building, whether that be in the parking lot or the Tower Rink Field, there is a process by which we fill out a form with the village, and they do ask questions about the layout. Will we need additional parking monitors? Will police staff need to be present? Will we need to put up like parking horses or parking goats? So there's like already a form that we fill out for outside events where all of those things are sort of being talked through, which is great. And then if it were to extend into the Tower Ring Field, that's a Park District property. So we work with the Park District as well, and they also alert the Northbrook Police for those types of events. And then, as Kate was mentioning, the library in the last year has been assigned a police liaison. So we have a detective that we work with. So if there are any incidents in the library where the law has been broken or we're skating where it's getting close, we can call and they will sort of talk through next steps, offer additional support. If we need somebody to come and walk through, they'll have officers come and walk through the building. So they've been really helpful, not only where we can call 911 in an emergency, but also just to talk through some of the more complex issues that we're starting to see come up. And then the police department also has social workers on staff. They have 3 social workers, and they have been great resources for us as we have dealt with some social concerns as well.
Has there been any consideration of, events coming up that maybe we want to reschedule just because the community may not be comfortable with the idea of coming to a
We
large?
don't really have any large events. And by large events, I would mean like our summer reading kickoff where we would have hundreds of people. So yes, do we have story time in the garden over at the community garden? Yes, but we don't have any large events planned. We do have some coming up this fall. But right now they're very focused on intelligentsia. So we were waiting until after that to talk more about that because we have plenty of time.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Oh, no, yeah,
it's.
I mean, it is, it's one of those things where it's like, do they want to come because it's a safe place? But then, no place is really safe. And so we have not canceled any programs or anything. But again, the programs we've been having have been just normal size, for lack of a better word, where you have 20 people at a book discussion, or a group of 12 families for story time. But that is something that I think will, I've been talking with a number of area library directors of what are you guys doing and what are you doing, and kind of talking through things in addition to talking with people here in the village. And honestly, nobody really knows what should we do? There aren't best practices out there, which you would think after the number of shootings there would be something, but so yeah, I don't have a good answer.
Okay. I mean, in the overall scheme, what happened was without a better word, random event, because you couldn't predict without having knowledge of the individual that he was going to do what he was going to do.
Correct.
So really just a question of, do we feel comfortable that our procedures are adequate for, our heightened awareness of the risk?
And we have not done any active threat training since before the pandemic, but we do have, security processes in place. I would say that as a public building, one of the biggest challenges, I was talking to Abby about this, is that we're a public building. People can walk in the door, and staff are not trained social workers. Staff are
Should they be?
no, but that has become, there was just a report from the Urban Library Council that was released, and it talks about trauma in libraries, and their big conclusion was, yep, everyone in every library is super traumatized because of what staff have to deal with now on a day-to-day basis. And we know that stuff needs to happen, but there's nothing in place. We don't have systems like the hospitals do. We don't have systems like police where there's people to talk to. And so that's something that we now as a profession have to do, but it's challenging because there isn't that framework already existing, and creating that from scratch is hard. And I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing a lot of people leaving public service, government jobs. They don't, it's not worth it.
Barbara raised, I think, what is a decent question. I don't know that saying we necessarily need a social worker on staff is the answer, but do we need to consider the idea of whether or not we need to add a position whose focus is on security and some of there's the armed security, but then there can be security that is someone who's designed or whose purpose is to help address any, not just physical threats, but any incidents that happen within the realm of the day-to-day operations, whether it's helping employees deal with some of the stresses of their position or helping address patron issues, whether that's something we should be considering.
And so Kelly is responsible for that. We have 2 security monitors who are here in the evenings and weekends. During the day, it is Kelly and I. And one of the things in the aftermath of July 4th that I was talking to the director at Glenview, and we were both talking about how do we help staff with this. And we have these great social workers in the village that are so tremendous and fabulous. But what about on the staff side? And so we talked, we're looking at, is there a way that we could get a position that we could split that would be focused on helping staff deal with some of these traumatic events, both big and things that happen in the library. Like we have patrons that are experiencing a mental health crisis, or people that are just, making staff uncomfortable because of their behaviors in following staff or looking at them or calling incessantly. And those are things that we've dealt with mostly with the police department, but there isn't a whole lot that we have in place to say to staff, like, okay, now let's help you heal from this. That isn't something, so that is something we're looking at, but that certainly is something that I think it would be a good idea for Kelly and I to talk more about what is needed. But we also, you don't want to just respond because of one horrific incident. How much is needed? And that's the thing. It's never, it seems like too much until it's not enough, but then, yeah. So.
But you're cognizant of the issue and you're focused on it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that's for us to know. That's the key.
Yeah. I just wish there were better solutions out there, because they're really, there aren't.
Everything is reactive.
Yeah. Yes. And we also don't want to turn the library into a lockdown where people have to, be patted down to come in, because that also isn't the atmosphere we want to create. And for a number of marginalized communities, they see someone that looks like they are, whether it's police or any type of security officer, they're not going to feel welcome. They're going to feel afraid. So then that gets into another side of things as well. So how do we keep people safe while also remaining, open and welcoming for everyone in the community? So if anyone has ideas, because there's not a lot out there. I have just one more thing on my report. It's also not really, well, it's half fun. So as I mentioned, we've had more people that have decided retirement is the time, and can't blame them. There's been a lot, but that does mean that hiring continues to be a very high priority. We're experiencing the Great Resignation just like everybody else, and so we're in a continual hiring process, I would say. But there is some good coming out of that, and that is that on August 1st, Jennifer is going to be joining us full time And so we are very excited to have her here full time. And so she's going to be helping more with HR, helping Lori. And still, don't worry, she's still coming to the board meetings. You're going to see her. She's not going to leave us. But she'll be splitting her time more between HR and executive assistant work. So that we're hoping will help with not only taking some things off of Lori's plate. The Society for Human Resource Management is like the national organization that sets out best practices for HR. And they used to have it that for every 100 employees, you want to have 1 FTE. And now they're saying that at a minimum, you should have 1.5 FTE for every 100. And so we are, when fully staffed, at about 120. And so there's just more now with COVID stuff and different requirements. So this is wonderful. And of course, Jennifer is fantastic. So she will be, she's already knows how to do most of it. So training and onboarding will happen pretty quickly. So there, I ended on a slightly positive. Yeah, that is a very positive one, right? And I'm happy to answer any questions about anything else in my report.
I have a quick question about the closing of the library
Yes.
and that letter that we received a copy of.
Oh, yes.
And your response was wonderful, but I think
Linda helped me. Well, she did most of the crafting. I did a little tweaking because I was having a really hard time figuring what to say. So I want to just give credit where credit is due.
well, I think I would have appreciated knowing, because people were coming to me and saying, why isn't the I'm sure it's because of this, but I would have appreciated, and I could be a good PR person for the reasoning. So that would be my comment.
I will definitely put more info when I send the email out to the board so that you guys have some talking points for this type of
It
thing.
was
Well,
just-
hopefully we're not going to.
Well, because that guy sent the letter to all of us,
Mm-hmm.
and none of us would respond, but
Yeah.
it would have been inviting confusion on my part, because I wouldn't have known what to say.
Yeah. Yes, I will make sure that in the future we have better talking points for that. Because it's hard to know how to respond. And just like we had, as I'm sure you guys saw in the patron comments, some really patrons that were like, thank you for taking space. And
Absolutely.
that is going to happen with, as everyone knows, every decision. So.
That'll be in next month's board packet.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Just so you know, Kate had mentioned to me on the 4th about closing, and I didn't push back because I felt that was a decision that was best left up to Kate. But more importantly, I felt it was a decision that no matter which way you went with it, you were going to have some in the community who were objecting to whatever decision you made.
No
If
question.
you close, people are going to be upset that the building's not open and, we've gone too far. If you're open, people are going to be upset because why aren't we being more sensitive and are they safe? But I thought Kate made the decision based upon the information we had at the time on the 4th, which was fairly early in the day before the individual had been apprehended. And so there was a lot of concern between Kate and the other village officials as to what might happen in the coming hours or the coming day if that individual wasn't apprehended and was still large. That was really the primary.
I don't question the decision at all. However,
Just give you talking points
it
to
was
help you
just
respond.
kind of like
Yeah.
when somebody stopped me and I said, I don't know why it's. I mean,
Yeah.
I knew, but there was
Did you
no.
not get the email? Did you guys get the
We
email?
got the
I
email.
sent?
I did,
Okay.
but
Not
It
enough
was-
info.
Not why it was.
Yeah, not
Right.
why. Yeah. I also didn't realize, so I'm right on Deerfield Road. I'm 5 minutes from downtown Highland Park. And I thought I was very on top of things and didn't realize until probably around 9 or 10 that night that I had been in shock.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to make excuses because I do think that having better talking points is really important. But I also think that I thought my brain was working a lot better than it actually was.
of course.
But thank you for mentioning it, because I do think, you guys are the ones that are out in the community, and I want you to have the information you need in order to be able to respond to people, whether they're happy or upset or just curious. So.
Any other questions for Kate? Okay, next item on the agenda are board member reports. Do any board members have anything they'd like to report?
I actually would. I was here to see the movie on Wednesday night, the Best Feast. And it was done so well with the staff that was here. They were lovely and professional and introduced everything in a wonderful way. It was nicely attended. It was immaculate in the theater, and it was just a pleasure. So I want to commend whoever puts that together.
Margot is our film librarian. I can't remember if she was there Wednesday night. I know she did the afternoon one. I know Ariel, who is our event production manager and formerly auditorium coordinator, Jim Miller. I feel like there's someone else that was working Wednesday night, and I don't remember who it was. But we will certainly pass along.
Please. I didn't know who
Mhm.
to make that comment.
Yeah.
But it
You
was
can always tell me, and I'll pass it if you email.
great.
Yeah.
But it was a pleasure.
Yeah, and a fabulous film,
It was.
right?
If you haven't seen The Best Feast
It's
from
gorgeous.
1987,
It's been a while.
it was
Yeah.
wonderful.
It's yeah. I can't even like it. But it gives you all the feels in a good way.
Anyway, it's a wonderful program.
Is that all?
That's it.
Okay, Jamie, Abby, do you have anything? Okay, if we can move on then to the unfinished business. First item is the EDI organizational assessment. Are you going to present on that?
I'm going to just talk for a few minutes, just
Yeah.
kind of give you guys an update on where we're at. And so we've been working on putting together the affinity groups. So this will be one community group and then staff groups, and then also the full board will have a separate group. And so we did surveying of staff and talked with Rashida about making sure we had a good representation. And she did say, she's like, every choice reveals something. And I'm like, but what are the right choices? She's like, there aren't any right choices. So, that being said, the groups that we ended up naming are, of course, the full board, the management team, and then our regular part-time and part-time staff. So not staff from marginalized groups for those, but staff that represent, full-time versus part-time stuff is helpful. And then we'll have the BIPOC, a group for BIPOC staff, which is the Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We're also going to have a gender identity group that is for people that identify as trans or non-binary, as well as an LGBTQ group, which again, the trans and non-binary could fall into that, but we didn't want to assume how people identified. And so we wanted to give people more choices so that they could make the choice that best fit their identity. And so we also have a group for neurodivergent, and then we're still working on the wording for this, but basically for non-dominant religious groups. So, Christianity is the largest group within the United States, but there are, of course, hundreds of religions. And so how can we seek feedback from people that represent different religions or religions that are, typically more marginalized? And then we have non-native English speakers. We have 20% of our population, of course, are immigrants here in Northbrook, and so we wanted to reflect that with our staff. And then people with disabilities, again, doing that along with the neurodivergent. Neurodivergent isn't, many people that identify as neurodivergent do not consider it a disability, and having known many of them, I really agree. And so again, giving people space to identify in the way that fits most closely with their own identity. And then we have a community group where we're essentially saying, if you identify with any of those groups, please join us. Rashida only recommends one community group, and so we didn't want to pick, do you pick people of color over the LGBTQ community? We didn't like that, and so we felt that having people that identified with, with an identity that was redundant, that is more marginalized would get us a better representation within the community. So we're working on putting info together to solicit members of the community. Jennifer will be reaching out to all of you after the board meeting to set up a time for the board to meet. This will be considered an open meeting, but we can do it on Zoom. So that will be coming. The goal is to have these sessions the end of August. So we're still finalizing the dates. We're meeting with Rashida next week. But from that, we will have, I have a better sense. And then when the board meets, Rashida will take you guys through a number of questions. I wanted to just share some of the questions that she had had in the past to give you a sense of what the topic, what this was going to look like. So one is, if you were to explain the current state of EDI at Northbrook Public Library to a stranger, what would you say? Or what seems to support the presence of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the library right now? What helps the organization practice and participate in diversity, equity, and inclusion? What are some of the roadblocks to this? What are some of the challenges? What is the very best next step that we could take toward becoming more diverse, equitable, and inclusive? And then, of course, the ever popular, is there anything else that you would like to add? So these are pretty meaty questions, and I'm sure that you guys will have lots of really great responses. And then after this, they take everything back and they analyze everything. It takes them about 6 to 8 weeks, and then they'll come back and present and share with the board the results and present what they call an after action report. So those are the next steps. So stay tuned for a Jennifer email to help us find a date. And that's it, except unless anyone has any questions on the process or anything with that.
It doesn't look like anyone has questions. Move on to the next item, which is new business. And the first item under new business is the library card accessibility report, which is Jen Hovanek.
Hi. First of all, let me say I am just really excited to get the chance to meet everybody and to be here with you all tonight. One of the great things that has happened to me in the last 8 months is that when I jumped into the team, the first thing that I did was sit down with everybody and I asked them, and there's 35 of them, so it's a lot of meetings and a lot of opportunities to talk, but I'm a big believer in transparency and open dialogue, so it works for me. But the questions that I ask people are, what do you think we're doing well? What do you think that we could improve upon? And then, what other suggestions would you like to have? And my proudest thing in the memorandum that we gave you today is that these are the results of direct ideas and feedback from people who are working at our front service desks. I hate the idea of front line. I like community line better, so at our community line spaces. But these are all, again, things, different ideas that are high impact with minimal effort. So it makes me very proud to be able to mill these ideas down and put together the puzzle in such a way that it will be beneficial on both sides of the desk. So it'll be beneficial for our patrons, making their visits to the library even more pleasurable than they are currently. But also it frees time from some of these tasks to allow staff to have longer and more meaningful interaction with the patron. So that's really important.
No action today. This was just to introduce the idea and see if there are any questions or any additional information on any of these so that we could prepare that for next month.
Yeah.
I thought there were a lot of good points. It seems like a lot of them are focused on removing sources of friction, which is all.
Yes, sir. I have a big old print. Well, it's not old because I made it, so it can't be that old. But I have a big print in my office that I made, and it says "Say Yes," and that is exactly what I try to live by, but also, through empowerment of staff, we want to create opportunities for them to say yes to the patron so that they feel like the Northbrook Public Library is serving them in the way that they need in that time. And yes doesn't always mean doing exactly what the person wants, but there's a compromise that we can reach to get there together. So that's a big driving force for me.
I love the non-expiring cards.
Isn't it amazing? So being able to do that just through the use of this simple national change of address database that already exists, it is one of those things where we have notifications set up, but we are a busy human race. So no matter whether you're getting a text message, a phone call, an email, all three of the above, because we do have some people that do that as well. And it's always a shock. It's always a surprise when it's like, my library card expires, but I've lived here for 40 years. And it's like, you know what? You have lived here for 40 years. So let's go ahead and figure out a way to keep you using the library and its services without any interruptions. And this is a tool that we can do it.
Especially because so many people use more of the online stuff now.
Yes.
Ebooks and stuff. It's like
100%
makes it
true.
a lot easier.
And we're hoping too that this will keep cards in the hands of, people who get their card when they're very young. This will keep cards in their hands even longer, which is kind of feeds into some of our other ideas too. So it seems like easy solutions. Which I like.
Anybody have any comments or questions?
Just well done.
Thanks. It's a group effort.
Smart. Smart.
Yeah, it's definitely just anytime I talk about coming to the library and we have all those positions open, so I'm always like, call me for a vibe check. I'll let you know what's going on there. And everything has just been the people that are here and are in the building every day want to be here. And that's amazing. So to be able to magnify that and amplify it, I'm happy to do it.
And to listen.
Yes. And it's I always like to say communication is both the root and solution of a lot of issues. So this
We
gives
have
us
2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, it's important.
Anybody have any requests for information, or are we good to go?
Okay. Good for a book recommendation too if you need that, where to find me.
So next month you'll see some fun recommended policy changes.
Great. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
The next item on the agenda is the salary benchmarking compensation philosophy discussion. For that, we want to move into a closed session. So can I get a motion to go into closed session pursuant to the Illinois statute 120-2C2, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Abby. Thank you, Barbara, for seconding. Can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Glovenger,
Yes.
Ms. Unical,
Yes.
Ms. Shu,
Yes.
Ms. Young.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. We'll move into closed session. Okay, we're back from our executive session. There's no motion or action to take out of the executive session. So the final item on the agenda is the agenda building. So on the agenda building is reviewing recommended policy changes based on the library accessibility report, review and approve steam boiler RFP, continued discussion on compensation philosophy, file detailed statement of all receipts and expenditures for previous months in accordance with our state statute 50 ILCS 305-1. Anything else anybody would like to raise for the next meeting for agenda building?
No.
Okay, that's all for agenda building. I will adjourn the meeting at 9:50 p.m.